to Unguarded Mind. This is a podcast with myself. I'm Tammy Keycaper and Desiree Grimaldi, and we are here to talk about anything and everything. There's nothing that's off limits, but we've got to get the conversations out about mental health and anxiety and depression and relationships. So welcome to Unguarded Minds.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good.
All right.
So today we're talking about childhood trauma.
Yes. And its impact as far as family roles. And we might even get into a little bit about how you grew up and what you experienced and what your role was growing up and how that can affect you down the road as far as your own romantic relationships.
Yeah, I am no stranger to that. It's definitely different when you look back at the different generations of the different traumas they go through. My husband always tells me, like, we'll never understand what our kids are struggling with today because we didn't have the same problems. Like, we didn't have, thank God, we didn't have social media or anything growing up. So like the different traumas that people experience, I feel like are obviously not all the same, but they are very generational in the same realm.
It took me a while to understand generational trauma because it was, same thing. I was kind of like, well, I didn't experience what my parents experienced and they didn't experience what I did. And I'm not experiencing what my kids are. And so how is it passed down if you didn't experience it? But it's the ripple effect of all of it. And you can't help but to bring what you know into your current situation. And I think, that's one of the reasons we're talking about it, because if you don't know it's a problem, if you don't have that awareness, you can't shift it. You can't do anything to fix it. And so, yeah.
So as somebody who grew up with like the pure definition of trauma, for me, like generational trauma was learned behaviors. It was experiences and then learned behaviors. And so like my grandmother, I guess, was a terrible mother. I don't understand why, like from the stories I've heard, she had a great childhood. But she was a drug addict and she was a terrible mother. And then my mother, like, it was crazy because my whole childhood, my mother treated me like her best friend. Like, that's how she would label it. And she'd always be like, I will be nothing like my mother. Nothing. I'll do everything to not be like her. And she turned out to be exactly like her. And it was like, she tried to, like, said the words, she didn't follow through with the actions. But I mean, I grew up with domestic violence, drugs, alcoholism, cheating, lying, stealing, crime. I mean, you name it. And it was in our household. And, but I felt like, I took that stance. I hated everything they did and they stood for. And I had one who was always honest with me and one who always lied. And so taking advantage of the one who was always honest with me, like when kids were doing drugs that were my age and stuff, I'd go home and I'd talk to my dad and I'd be like, people are trying this, they're trying that. And he'd be like, it makes your brain bleed. I'm like, I don't ever want to try this. But he was so brutally honest with it that I never did anything. Like, I was scared to death of it. I didn't want to be them. I had bad dreams when I was like 9 that I was drinking a Budweiser and couldn't pull it away from my mouth. And it literally like drowned me. I don't think I had my first drink until I was in my 20s. Wow. And still to this day, like carrying that on, it's like, we'll go out and have a couple drinks, or around the holidays, you drink a little bit more maybe. And then we'll be like, okay, we're not going to drink for like the next month. Just mentally to be like, make sure we still can do that. And not that, I'm a heavy drinker by any stretch. Like my kids are like, Mom, that's number 2. That's your limit. But so I think that's where the generational trauma comes in. And then even like picking up the anger that they had, like maybe they were angry because they were going through withdrawals, but the way that they responded to situations was a learned behavior with or without the drugs or alcohol. So then it's like trying to break those things too.
So how do you think you experienced it growing up, and then you said, I'm never going to do that, just like your mom said, I'm never going to do that. So what was the difference for you that you actually shifted that? Like, what did you have that your mom didn't have?
For me, I mean, for me personally, I think it was strength. And it was courage to travel the unknown path. Like, cause I think that, and I explain it to my kids all the time. I'm like, it's so easy for people who grow up with addiction or things like that. It is so easy just to be like, that's all I know. That's the path I know. It's, and in a sad way, it's almost comfortable for them because they're around those people. They know those people. They know that lifestyle before they even jump into it. So I'm like, the hard one is the one over there that I have no idea what it looks like on the other side.
Yeah.
I don't know what those people look like. I don't know what that life looks like. And for me, I had so much hate and anger with them. Like, I didn't even want to share the path with them. Like, I didn't want to be anywhere near them. I wanted to be so far over here.
So
with her.
You drew your strength from almost a level of repulsion. Mm-hmm. And that, yeah. So anywhere along the line, did you have that one supportive person that encouraged you to, or gave you an example of what not to do? I think that helps, especially as a kid.
So they weren't like a direct support system, but I had a support system in the sense, like, my mother left. My biological father died when I was like 11. My stepfather who raised me, he was in jail. My mother met a new guy within like a week. She moved in with him and like moved me in with him. And I came home one day. It was probably a month after she met him. And there was a note taped to the door and it said, "We're moving to Florida in 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere to live." And I was 14. Yeah. So my school knew because I had anger issues. I was in like an alternative school. They said I had problems with authority. And so they put me in this school. So I had the same 5 teachers throughout high school. And they knew who I was. They seen me every day. And teachers, they hear more than kids think they do. So they kind of knew everything that was going on. She left. I lived with a friend for like a week and then lied and got an apartment and had a full-time job. And so child services got called, and they came to the school, and the school begged them to let me stay in the situation I was in. They were like, she's a good kid. She comes to school every day. She has good grades. She works. She's maintaining an apartment. She's doing all the things. And honestly, the person that she is, we think that you'll completely disrupt her and her path if you put her in a system. And of course, it was a different time. I mean, not that long ago, but it was a different time.
When?
Yeah. But I mean, that was 1999, 2000. Like it really wasn't that far back, but they let me. The school almost took a sense of responsibility. Like they said, well, if she doesn't come to school or her grades start slipping or we hear things or see things, then we'll absolutely let you know. And they had like counselors come in and talk to me. And I was driving without, like, my mother's like, "Don't be mad at me. I left you a car. I did you a favor. It wasn't registered. It wasn't insured. I didn't have a driver's license." So I would drive to school in this car. And so the school called, they waited for me to get in the school, but they called the cops. So then the cops were like, "You were driving?" I was like, "You didn't see me driving it." Growing up with criminals, I know how to circumvent it. But I was like, "You didn't catch me driving that car. I don't know how that car got here. It's not registered to me." But the school made it a point to be like, we're watching you and don't ever get behind that wheel again until you have a driver's license. So they had their ways without directly impacting like the life I was trying to create. So they were a support system in that way. And then, I had I had some friends, families that I looked up to, that would encourage me, because my mother's encouragement, it's so disgusting to even say, but like, she would tell me when I was younger, like, oh, you're so pretty. You're going to just have whatever you want in life. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Go on a poll? Like, what the hell does that mean? That is not encouragement. Where
But
my
that's
father was like,
practice.
my father was like, go to school. I was the first person to graduate high school in my family.
Wow.
And then to go on to college and to run a business and to be married and have kids and own a home. Like, we didn't own a home growing up. So there were so many things that, in a way, I didn't explore as much as I should have in life. Like, me and my husband would have loved to have not bought our home right away and traveled more and done the things. But because of my upbringing, like, I had a checklist. I was like, we're getting married, we're having kids, I'm getting a college degree, like, we're buying a house, we're checking the boxes. Even if we turn around and sell it, like, but I need that I don't want to use validation as a word, but I needed that
control,
that
it's
accomplishment.
like you were subjected to so much that you didn't have control over, which happens when you're little. You don't pick your family, and and it's all that and so probably seeking that level of, oh my God, what do I have control over? And then and it's interesting, like, when we're talking about the family roles, there's the family hero, there's the enabler, there's the mascot, there's the scapegoat, there's the lost child. And you became the scapegoat. You were the one that was like,
I think I was all of them at one point.
And I was, there, and we mix depending on the ages, and your rebellious stage was like, I'm going to get in trouble, I'm getting in fights, like, all that emotion has to go somewhere. And so it came out, and then it was like, oh yeah, she's the problem in the family, instead of it being like, whoa, what's going on at home? I mean, your school saw it. Yeah, your mom had some enabling stuff with, just wanting to be in a relationship and have the next guy on hand, or how do you see yourself as the different family roles that you experienced?
So with my mother, I was always the hero. That's really what was like the nail in the coffin in our relationship. I haven't spoken to her in 11 years, and she was on like husband number 3, boyfriend, however many. And what killed me was, so she was married and she started dating this guy. She always had the backup in line before she left. And so she called me and my husband and she said, I need help moving my stuff out of our house while he's at work into my new boyfriend's house. And I wanted no part of it. Like, I was like, oh, here it is. Here's the cycle. So I didn't want any part of it. But then I was like, I think I have some stuff there that I need to get. And so we went to help. And I remember her boyfriend at the time, first time meeting him. And he said, Desiree, he said, aren't you so proud of all the things your mother has done in your life? And I was like, no, what? And my husband must have heard him from across the room, because he came in like quick. And I was like, what did you just say to me? Because, your brain gets going, and knowing her and knowing, her patterns, I was like, I know exactly what she said to you. I know exactly the story she paved out for you. And I was like, and, kind of going back to that rebelliousness, I was like, was it smoking crack? Is that the proud moment you mean? I become a smart ass and condescending. And, he starts lecturing, and I'm an adult. I'm a mother at this point. And he starts lecturing me. And he says, you can't judge her until you've walked in her shoes. I was like, I have carried her effing shoes. I have carried her. I am the only person that can say, whatever. I said, she told you whatever fantasy that she wants you to believe in the way that she wants you to perceive her. I said, that is not the reality. But so the nail in the coffin and the hero aspect of it was, he was like, I have her. You don't have to worry about her anymore. And I was like, thanks. been long enough. It's been 30 something years. I've been taking care of her. It's your turn. And took that as I don't have to be the hero anymore. But, within a week, he's calling me. I don't know what to do. How do you handle this? I'm like, oh, no, she's your problem. I don't have to worry about her anymore, remember? But she was at the bar and she was starting fights. And not only was she not a strong person mentally, but physically, she wasn't a very strong person. And she would start fights and she'd tell him, go ahead, I'll just call my daughter up here and she'll take care of you. And like, we lived in the same area. So I know these people and these people know me. And I'm like, I'm walking around with small children and you're using me as a ploy to be out here starting whatever you want. And that was really the nail in the coffin. I was like, I'm 30 something years old. Like, you're 50, grow. Like, this is ridiculous. And so that was really the nail in the coffin for me. I was like, I'm losing sleep. I'm stressed. I'm depressed. I'm like reliving this trauma over and over and over again, and really just taking that control back. Like, my time is served. I'm done. I've served my debt to society. And, so that was really, I feel like with her, I was always the hero, but then the enabler came out because there was younger years where I did jump in and I did defend her. And, when her and my father would get in abusive fights, I would stand between them and be like, hit me, don't hit her, which he wouldn't, but it was like, so it was kind of, with her, I played a lot. I know I was a huge enabler with my dad towards the end. He was a drug addict. And when you see a grown man cry that you love and respect, you kind of are like, what do you need? Whatever you need, I'll make it happen. So I feel like I've played a lot of them. I was never really the blame until my adulthood. Like, my mother, she quit drinking for a little while. And then because I got married and I had a kid, it was my fault she started drinking again. No, I fell off a porch and almost died. And it was my fault she started doing drugs because I almost died. So in that sense, but not like you're a bad kid, but like, I'm going to use your trauma as an excuse.
And the layers of gaslighting that you're talking about over and over. And again, not understanding what, like, that doesn't make any sense. But, how do you, I don't even know how you organize that as a little kid. And without having some support or some understanding or someone to validate what you're feeling and thinking and needing, that you're not asking for too much. And it's okay to set a boundary.
And understanding that it's not normal. So I was always more mature just because I've seen so much from such a young age. And I always, as much as I talked, I listened. And so I knew things, and I was never afraid of my mother. She tried to instill it here and there, but I was never afraid of her. So I didn't bite my tongue very often, and she hated it because I don't think she went past 6th grade in school. Like, so I was smarter. I was quicker. I was clear-minded. So I would throw it back at her a lot, and then that would infuriate her more. And then she would just get worse. So when, like, one time I remember she asked, like, what do you want for your birthday? And everybody had the nameplate necklaces. And I was like, I want mine. Well, I have a long name, and you had to pay by the letter. So it was like stupid expensive. And she was like, there's no way I could afford that. And I was like, you sell drugs. Why can't you afford it? You're paying your friends rent. Like, why can't, and because I knew those things. And so then she wanted an excuse that weekend. And I remember it like it was yesterday, but that weekend she said to my dad, she said, she doesn't care. As soon as he came home from work, she doesn't care if I go to jail. She wants this necklace, and it doesn't matter what it cost me. And I was like, okay, that's not what I said. But so that was her excuse. And so her and my father binged all weekend. Just locked themselves in their room. They were smoking crack or doing coke all weekend. And Monday rolled around, and I heard her all weekend crying and whining and all this stuff. She wouldn't talk to me. Nobody talked to me the whole weekend. And so I was already on eggshells a little, but Monday rolled around. I was like, they'll be sober again today. And well, they were, but they were still, now they're angry. You know, they're going through those mood swings. And I was in the bathroom. I was getting ready. My father dropped my mother off at work. I was getting ready for school, and I had hair like down to my waist. So I had like globs of gel putting it in. And my father came in, and usually he was on my side. And so I was like, he's going to walk in and be like, oh my God, did you hear what I had to listen to all weekend? But that wasn't, so that's what I was anticipating. And he came in and he said, he smacked my hand and he said, you're not putting anything in your hair. You're going to school the way you are. And I was like, haha, no, I'm not. I have like super curly hair. That's not how I'm going to school. And so I proceeded, and he punched me on the side of the face. And immediately it like blew up, and I had like blood blisters or whatever. And I was like, I am not my mother. I will have you thrown in jail. And that was the only response I could, because I'm not going to cry and show weakness. I'm certainly not going to really try and fight you. But I was like, I will have you arrested. And that was like my stance of, I am not her. Mm-hmm. And our neighbors were teachers, and he said, great. He grabbed me by the shirt, and we lived on the second floor, and he pushed me down the stairs. I had an overhang, so I hit my other side of my face on that. And we got in the driveway. He said, I'll bring you. And we got in the driveway, and the teacher was leaving to go to school and seeing it. And he turned around and went back in his house, and he called the cops. And we were arguing in the driveway, and we went upstairs. He's like, go finish getting ready for school. And I'm like, I can't go to school like this. How do I even explain that? And, you know, so in a sense, I started to backpedal without realizing, like in the moment, I was like, I'm not her. I'm going to do this. But then as it progressed, I started backpedaling subconscious, like, I don't know if it's subconsciously, but not realizing it. And we went upstairs, and the cops came, and I immediately like sat like this, and they were like, move your hands. And I was like, no, it's fine. Nothing happened. And I was trying, like, I think I had too long to think about the next consequences to it. Yeah. And of course they moved my hands, and they took pictures, and they hauled him off, called my mother home. She comes home, and she's like, great. Now he got arrested. All because you don't know how to shut your mouth. And she had to bail him out, and she was mad I was grounded. And child services came, and they said, because he's not her real father, one of them has to leave the house. They can't be in the same house, you know, till this investigation's over and whatever. And they both looked at me, and I had to go. I was like 11, 12, and I had to go stay with a friend for like a couple months. Mm-hmm. So that's such a tangent, but it's like there's so many layers of like each piece of it, and what role you played, and how they all shaped you. It's so crazy.
And you talked about so many things just now, the mood swings that you experienced, and the not knowing what was going to happen yet, and the feeling like, oh, you're on my side, but then kapow, you get punched in the, you know, just the differences of fast forward to when you were saying, I don't know why we bought a house, and I don't know why. I think that has a lot to do with it. When you experience that kind of thing, you don't have any stability, you don't have any control, you don't have any. Everybody needs a sense of control over your life, and whether you're an infant or whether you're 105 years old, you need a sense of control. It doesn't mean that you're a controlling person. It just means that you need to know what's coming around the corner. It sounds like you didn't have that growing up, and you know, fast forward into, you know, where you are now. Clearly, great mom, not repeating this stuff that you grew up with. You have a healthy relationship, you and Desi. You know, it's like, I don't know, that you got to give yourself so much credit that your body also will never forget. Your conscious, your subconscious, even your unconscious, you'll never let go of what you grew up with. And I don't know, what kind of advice do you have for people to be able to shift into, you know, working through their stuff and not repeating these patterns, and recognizing your role then and now?
So I think everybody's trauma is different. And how people handle it is very different. So Jesse had his own set of things that he dealt with growing up, which I'm still trying to convince him to be a guest for us. But so he had stuff, and he's a completely opposite person of me. If somebody brings up the past, he's like, don't want to hear it. Don't live there. Nothing I can do about it. Where I talk about it. Like, I'm a habitual storyteller, especially with him. And he's like, when we first started dating, he's like, I can't even listen to this. He's like, you know how hard it is loving somebody and hearing the things that were done to them. Especially because what we talk about so far here is like the sugar coating of, of the real stuff. But he's like, I can't do it. And I'm like, you just got to suck it up, because that's how I heal. Like, I have to talk about it until I don't cry about it anymore.
Okay.
And he's like, you're living in the past though. You live there. You're not. And I'm like, I do, but I don't, like, because like you said, I can't let it go, because I feel like the second I let it go, and you and I have talked about it, like, that shoe's going to drop, that second shoe's going to drop. And it's that chaos moment, of like, oh, good, everything's going good. I'm waiting for somebody to punch me in the face. I'm waiting for, that next thing to happen. And so I don't know. I mean, the advice I would have for people, one, I'm a big advocate of, I don't care if it's your parents or not. If they are toxic and you can't develop and you can't grow as a person, they have ran their course in your life. And that's hard. A lot of people are like, they're your mother, no matter what. And I had enough trauma where that no longer couldn't matter, because now I'm somebody else's mother and I have responsibilities.
I like that. They've run their course in your life. They've
Yeah.
run their course. And I think that's such a powerful statement that, yeah, they didn't serve you. They don't serve you now. They don't, and it's okay. Like, giving yourself permission to let go and create a boundary. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And well, because what do they say? People are here for a season, a reason, or a lesson, something like that. Like, there's a saying about it.
Yeah.
A lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and when we say like, oh, they no longer serve me, that doesn't mean financially or material wise. Like, you're not helping me grow. And we talk about to our kids about it, and my daughter's like, so all relationships are transactional. I'm like, no, but you're not going to stay in a relationship if it doesn't make you feel good, and you're not making that person feel, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, whatever. It's not transactional per se, but it is multi-beneficial. Nobody wants to be in a one-sided relationship with anybody.
Yeah. And I think that thing that you talked about, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I think that a lot of times in relationships, at least doing couples counseling, I see people the first sign of conflict and they're out the door. The first red flag and they're out the door. And sometimes that can be a trauma response from how you grew up. And yeah, you can keep yourself safe because you never have a really deep, intimate connection with somebody, because first sign you're out the door of any conflict. But I think that it can also make you really lonely too. And so I think it's I think that's how people handle conflict. And like you said, taking care of each other and creating a safe space for each other to be able to be vulnerable and talk. And if you don't learn that growing up, it is up to you to figure out how to learn how to do that. Yeah.
Jesse was reading a study about that, about like why arranged marriages work so much and so well. And it's like, because they come from the same backgrounds, or like they seek out people who are on the same level, same background, same moral, same upbringing. So those people learn to love each other. Where like right now, you go out and meet somebody at a bar or a restaurant or whatever, you don't feel any real ties to them. And then with social media and the phone stuff, you're always like looking at the next best thing. Like, she's prettier, she has a nicer body, she has more followers, like whatever it is, they're always looking at better. And it's all right at their fingertips now. where arranged marriages, like the families have committed, the families have approved, like there's so many other levels of acceptance. And me and Jesse talk about that all the time. Like if he grew up with a white picket fence, we wouldn't mesh. You know, we have experienced some of the same things, and we could connect on them. We understand each other's responses better. Even though we're different, like we get it. I've seen so many relationships where somebody was very traumatized and the other person wasn't. And they're like, I can't even fathom what you're talking about. I have no idea. I can't even imagine.
And it's I was thinking that's interesting how Jim, my husband, grew up. He grew up with his mom, single mom, worked a lot. He has 2 sisters. And they moved constantly. Like we'll be driving around. It's like, oh yeah, I lived there and I lived there and I lived over here, you know, and like I don't understand any of that. My parents were married until probably went to college till I was like 21. And we pretty much stayed in the same place. My dad was in the military, but that was, you know, normal moving, whatever that is. But and so yeah, so he talks about his childhood and I talk about mine, and there's probably some kind of like, huh? Like you experienced what? Like your parents got along? You know, it's gotta be interesting from that perspective also.
I feel like you're universal though, because of what you do for a profession. And then, you know, so I feel like you're a little bit more universal. Like you can understand and analyze it a little bit better than like a normal person, like an everyday person who's not in the clinician arena.
Yeah. Well, and he tells me I need to get out of therapy mode sometimes, so maybe that's true.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I guess it's awareness, and he's got to get comfortable with my level of uh, communication. Where I guess I was going is like I didn't experience hardly any conflict growing up, and I don't remember my parents ever fighting ever. My brother and I, we'd fight and stuff, but I never remember my parents raising their voices. I never experienced it. And I think that there's almost like 2 ends of the spectrum to where someone's involved so much with just that violence and that toxicity in your face. And then where it's pretty much non-existent. And you don't learn a balance between the 2. You don't learn like conflict is okay. And that could be another reason for that, you know, waiting, like if the shoe's going to drop, if it drops once, your world is kind of rocked because you're like, what's this? I don't even know how to deal with conflict. And and it's not, I certainly wouldn't call that abusive at all. You know, growing up in an abusive household, I didn't experience that at all. I just didn't experience any conflict. So when my parents got divorced, I remember my mom had taken my brother and I we went to Denny's. My dad was he was the commander of an Air Force base, and so he was gone for a whole year up in Thule, Greenland. And she took us to Denny's and was like, we're getting divorced. And we were just like, what? Like, can you pass the pancakes? Like, I don't even know what to say right now. It was the most bizarre conversation. And, you know, she and I and my family, we talked about it now, that it was just like, what happened? You know, and just to go from that to this. And I don't know. I wonder if it somehow affected, you know, me in relationships. And I was married for 12 years and got divorced and had to figure a lot of things out on my own. But yeah, I think that it's you have to have a balance of learning what conflict is about and what healthy conflict is, and how you show up, because you're right, it's so much easier to just like pull the covers over or come out with your claws, and there's got to be a middle ground if you're going to find some healthy resolution.
Yeah, so not your ex-husband, but previous to that, you were in an abusive relationship.
I was, yeah.
So because you didn't come from conflict, like how, I mean, that must have rocked your world. Just, you don't even see people arguing, and then you find yourself in that situation. So how, like, what was that like?
God, that was, I was younger. I think I always felt like I wanted to have a boyfriend. I wanted someone because if you didn't have a relationship, I don't know where this came from. I don't know if it's my family or whatever, but if you didn't have someone like a relationship, then somehow you lost worth or you weren't important or you weren't necessary. I don't know if it's linked to like a rejection type thing. There's still a lot that I need to figure out on my own too. Um, and I think that this person came into my life and charming, just kind of like, I've got the world and I've got you too. There was something about that level of confidence that I was like, oh my God, you're gonna save my life. You're gonna be my person. You're gonna, and it was almost that extreme charm that was so enticing. And I think I just disregarded all the red flags. Wasn't old enough or hadn't taken the time to come up with any of my non-negotiables because I didn't know. And yeah, it turned bad. There was a lot of jealousy, control that turned into verbal, emotional, mental, so much gaslighting. Just I remember one time my colleague and I were in my office um and we were working at a mental hospital at the time and um the boyfriend at the time, he called and was super nice. Hey, what do you want to do tonight? I thought we could grab dinner, go to, get a movie, whatever. And we hung up the phone. Probably 5-10 minutes later, he called back. Who are you fucking? You're da, da, da. You're calling me names, calling me. And my partner, my colleague and I, we looked at each other and we're just like, oh my God, what just happened? And he's like, Tammy, he's on coke or he's like doing drugs or something. I was like, no, there's no way. There's no possible way. Well, 5 years later, after I'd been in this relationship, it turned out he sure was. I had no idea. And those signs were right there. But I think it was just like a denial, just a naivety, just, and I think it was
Well, it's
maybe,
probably different though, like with your career path. Like, I'm sure it's like I would be able to tell the moment somebody opened their mouth, like what they're on.
I
And
could not.
especially my parents, but because you didn't grow up around it, but you knew what it was supposed to be on paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
addiction wise, but not. So I'm sure it was harder to identify if it's not something you've ever been around. I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, oh, I will know, and you will be in a world of trouble. Like,
I thought that's so true. That's so true. Because then, yeah, he would turn around and like, I'm so sorry, and I love you, and then like the love bombing thing, and because that was nice and pretty and felt good and on surface, was like, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I forgave all the other stuff, and then it just kind of repeated until
was there a moment where you were like, I'm gonna start filling out your admittance papers to the hospital I'm working at?
no, nope. In fact, I'm like, sign me up. Let's go for another year.
Do you
um,
think that you didn't like, do you think because you were early in your career, like you were trying not to like analyze like outside of work, or
no, I don't
were
even
you
think that
so
was.
early in your career like that maybe
Yeah.
you like were just learning to analyze? Like, do you think any of that happened or?
I honestly don't. I think, and that could be sometimes a misperception of therapists and counselors that we have our shit together. And a lot of times, it's when I'm helping people and listening to them and guiding them and it is crystal clear. It's like I can see everything from a 30,000 foot view and moving the pieces around. And
Mhm.
when it's your own stuff,
Oh yeah.
it goes right out the window. And yes, way earlier in my career, I guarantee I'll never be in a situation like that again because I know and I've learned and I found my worth ever again, ever. But at the moment, it was I I was just kind of bobbling along, and I think that it's so easy to get into that because the worse the behavior is from at the time my boyfriend, the less I felt about myself and my confidence started to shrink. And there went my voice. I became super passive. And just kind of became a shell of a person. And so that's the scary part about it is that, when you're little and you grow up with that, there's something that has to happen that breaks you out of that pattern, something that goes, no, I am not my mother. You will not do this to me. And the same, I guess it's kind of the same. I think anyone's subjected to it. It's not just because you're a therapist doesn't mean you're protected from having an abusive relationship. It just means that you have to be very cautious and careful so that you don't get wrapped up into that stuff. And
well, and that's a big thing too. Like, I reference my kids a lot because I grew up the way that I did. We have like we are a family that really does. We work from home, they school from home, we're together all the time. We've never treated our children like children. We've always talked open and honestly with them. And mainly because I think the one thing I took away from my father is that no matter what he did, I had a high level of respect because he always treated me like a person. As far as like communicating with me, he wouldn't lie to me. He would be 100% honest. He would answer questions that he maybe didn't want to answer, but he was always honest. And so I always felt comfort no matter the situation going to him. Even if I was in the wrong, I knew he'll back me in the present and we'll have a conversation later on in private. And, and I always want my kids to have that. I'm like, I don't care if you're 13 and your friends are drinking and you call me, like no questions asked, just call me and I'll come. So we have a lot of raw, gritty conversations with our kids, but like really explaining, because our daughter is a teenager now, explaining to her, like, the bad people don't look bad. Like they're not going to look like this persona that people have, like they're going to look like drug addicts and bums or like, this certain way. And you're going to be able to identify that they're bad is not reality. They're going to be wearing a suit and they're going to be charming and they're going to be, and they're not going to start beating you day one. Like it's going to progress. It's going to, and just explaining that because that is really how you get sucked in. And also explaining to her, like, there's more than one, like there's always two sides and the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Because it's her perception, his perception, and then the reality. And explain to her, like, so they'll say, well, your dad was bad because he hit your mother. And I'm like, yeah, there's 100 other ways he could have handled that. However, he wasn't always that way. There was something that kept her. They were together 14 years. Yep. Like he had good qualities that she was attracted to. People, I guess it drove me crazy. Like parents, when I hear parents going, oh, their father was such shit and such a garbage person. And that's all that they harp on, which may very well be true by the time you ended everything. But when you're talking to their kids or their family, like there was something good. There was something that pulled you in. There was something that you fell in love with. There was something that made you marry him. There's something that made you have multiple children with him. Like it wasn't all bad. And just explaining to her, like, and not only that, they may not be a bad person. You guys just may be bad together. You just might be toxic as hell for each other due to your own personal stuff. So I don't,
I think that's why it's so difficult for people to leave an abusive or toxic or just unhealthy relationship, is because they're looking for that all or nothing. They're looking for that 100% he's a horrible person or she's a horrible person. And yeah, it's you stay because of something. There's some kind of secondary gain that people have by staying. And if it wasn't working somewhere along the line, you would have been gone a long time ago. And yeah. And so yeah, it's about, I guess, listening to yourself, giving yourself that permission and getting help. I mean, I think that was one of the best things that I could have done was pop myself right in therapy, read and listen to things and get counseling, because when you're in that space, and you don't have anyone validating that this is an unhealthy situation, or validating what you know in your heart of hearts is wrong, and helping you see that and become more empowered, you're going to stay.
And so through that relationship, though, playing devil's advocate, do you know anything about his history? Like, did he even realize like how toxic he was acting? Is it something that he grew up seeing? Is that how like his father was? Or, you know what I mean? Like, do you know any of that? Or
Yeah, I think if I remember right, I believe he did not have a good relationship with his dad. I can't remember if his dad was still alive. I think he and his mom kind of butted heads. I think he put her on a pedestal, but they weren't close, and I don't know why. Um, and and no siblings. But yeah, I don't. That was definitely something that I talk to my kids about, is know the family. Know the family. Um, Ask questions, because I didn't, and I just didn't know to ask questions. I didn't know how important family roles were. I didn't know how important that, you're just such a little sponge when you're growing up, and you're taking in everything that's presented to you, and you either take it in as, yes, this is the correct way of relating, or you learn how to question it, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. But that's one thing I talk to my kids about too, is you got to ask questions, because you don't just marry the person, you marry the family. And
yeah.
and it comes and it's not that if you have a history like that, well, you're a good example, if you have a history like that, it doesn't mean that you're doomed for the rest of your life. It just means that that person has to take the ownership and the responsibility to work on it and understand what happened, work through it, and then learn how to do something differently.
So somebody, I can't remember who, and I was young, but somebody talking about dating, they were like, always watch how the man treats their mother and their sisters. And men always watch how women treat their cars, and they could determine. And so I was like, well, I'm good. My car's always clean. But so that early sign, because I was in a super toxic relationship before I met Jesse for probably 7 years. And he treated his mother good. But then looking at like understanding the full dynamic of the family, it's like he treated her good because she was his enabler and he was her enabler. And so it was just this vicious circle. And but it was the siblings, down the road, who I did look up to and were part of that support system that we are talking about, his older siblings. And they were like, what are you doing? Leave him already. Like, this is ridiculous. And, I was like, no, he's going to change. Everything will be different. And they're like,
Blah, blah.
yeah. But they were like, no, like they were me at one time. Like, they took those different paths, and they came from the parents who were a certain way. And I was too young to fully analyze it. What do they say? Like, your frontal cortex can't see, the big picture. I think I was probably 16, 15, 16, 17. And so it's like, see how they treat their mother, but you also have to kind of identify what role the mother plays in the situation too. Because I think that's a big factor.
We'll have to do another podcast on the whole attachment theories. I think it's fascinating. I subscribe a lot to that in my counseling that I do. But it's so much about the caregiver. And because they're the ones who are doing the attaching, and you're the ones that are getting attached. But the caregiver's frame of mind and mental health and awareness has everything to do with that. And so
there's a reality show. You know how I love my
yes,
there's a reality show, and I can't think of the name of it. I have not watched it yet, but I see the commercials and I'm like, oh God. But it's like the men and their mother have like such a deranged relation, like so overly connected, and the mothers refuse to let the fiance or the wife like have any say. Like the mother intrudes and goes on honeymoons with them, family vacations, lets the wife or fiance know, like, I am the number one woman in this whole dynamic. And I would lose my mind. I would be like, oh my God. That would be the biggest red flag in the world for me. And like I don't know. I have not watched it yet. I'm like, I would probably be throwing things at the TV. Is
You
it
know how
mother-in-laws? I gotta figure out what it was.
that one's gonna send me over the edge. Oh my God. No, we could have a heyday with that because sometimes, yeah, well, long story, but yeah, I think that it's such an important factor because then however your attachment style was solidified is how you go into the future and into your future relationships, any relationship, not even just romantic, but your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, your bosses. Um, yeah, it's a fascinating one. Oh my God, of course they have a reality deal.
I'm trying to Google like what the name of it is, and I can't find it. But it reminds me, what was that movie? Like Monster-in-Law? Did you see
Oh
that
yeah,
with like
yeah,
Jennifer Lopez? So it reminds me of like that, but so much worse. so, so much worse. I'm like, I remember seeing one like clip of it, and I'm like, is the mother literally sleeping between them in bed? Like she was so
no.
like that. I don't know. That would be a turn off to me. As take away the red flags, like is your mother still wiping your ass? Like, what are we doing here?
Did you see
That would be too
the
much for me.
Bad Moms Christmas? Did you see Bad Moms Christmas? Oh my God, it's so funny. But Kristen
Okay.
Bell, her mom, is, yeah. He's, they were having sex, or she and her husband, and then someone sneezed or something, and she's like, "Oh, bless you," and they turn the light, and she's over there in the corner. I just wanted to be with you, and So naturally, here comes a reality show to accentuate it. Well, good. We're
Yeah.
gonna talk about that. So yeah, I think that understanding what is healthy and what's not healthy, understanding what's toxic and what's normal and what's healthy. Um and just because you went through things in your past doesn't mean that you're doomed for the rest of your life, but you got to get some awareness about the impact and how it continues to show up in your past, in your future, in your current relationships with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's huge. A lot of people, I feel like they struggle with that more so. Just because everybody puts a label on everything now. So I feel like it creates a lot of excuses for people to not look in the mirror and take responsibility. Like I am an angry person at times. I know that I can really hurt somebody with my words. Like if I get so angry to the point where now I'm just saying things to hurt you, you know what I mean? Then I know that this relationship is not going to work. Like I don't know, like being able to be like,
Yeah.
I could be a real asshole and hurtful and, just accepting those things. Like I know that's a flaw of mine, but if I allow you as a person to get me to that point, we have no reason to communicate. So it's identifying. Like I know that I have insecurities. I know I have abandonment issues. I know, and it is not my partner's responsibility to fix me.
Yeah.
He gives me grace with it, but ultimately, he'll be like, your insecurity showing. You know what I mean? And I need to reel it back. And I even had a piece of paper for the longest time, like taped to my desk, and it was like, is this true? Is this really happening? Is like a checklist to go through, because I would let like abandonment or insecurity issues pop up, and I would create this whole story in my head of, I know exactly what's happening. I see all the signs, and it's like, really, where? Like what? Like when you snap out of it, you're like, what were you seeing? And so I did. I had a checklist, and
Such a
I
great
actually
idea.
still have it pinned up behind me, but it's like, is this real? What evidence do you have? Like, is this happening in front of you? You know, is there reasons for you to be feeling this way? And it's just kind of like, look back at what you're feeling. Like maybe something happened that triggered me to think of my mom that day or my dad. And now I'm completely taking it out on my spouse because I saw a show with drug addicts on it. Like, you know, like whatever it is, you know, that triggered me. And I think that people really, really, really lack taking self-responsibility these days.
And I think that awareness is key, being responsible, and then trying to understand where it's coming from. I think, yeah, just when you just now said that, I've gotten feedback that, Tammy, you can be mean. You can be so cutting with your words. And I didn't grow up with that, but it's almost a defense mechanism because of this relationship that, again, those formative, you know, early 20s relationship of what is love, what's a relationship. And because it was so toxic, yeah, it's like, even though I didn't grow up with it, I experienced it, and it's easy for me to carry it forward and just come out with a vengeance if you push me far enough. And it's that awareness and the ownership of going, I did it. And that takes courage. It takes courage to have ownership. Not fun. Yeah.
No. And that drove me nuts too, like growing up the way I did when me and Jesse were early in our marriage or relationship. It all happened very quickly. So it's all the same thing. But when we were very early on, I argue. Not that I love to argue, but I felt like that's what you do. That's how you show you care. You get very passionate about it. You argue about it. He'd walk away. It would piss me off so bad. He'd be like, I am not arguing with you. He would leave or he'd go walk away. And I'm like, no, you need to explain. He said, I am not explaining anything because all you want to do is be right. And all you want to do is argue. He said, I'm not doing it. He said, we're going to say things we don't mean. That's just not who I am. And it drove me nuts. And for the longest time, due to my trauma, I'm like, well, if you're not arguing with me, it's because you don't love me. You don't really love me. You don't really care. Because if you did, you'd be here fighting with me for it. Or, you know what I mean? And because I grew up that way, nobody walked away. Somebody got taken away by an ambulance or whatever. Like they fought it out, literally. So to me, that was the care, the jealousy. Like my father was very jealous. He was a very controlling man. So Jesse was not that. Everybody I dated previous was that. Jesse's not that. He's like, listen, if you find somebody else attractive and that's what makes you happy, I want you to be happy. Just tell me, you know? And I'm like, you don't love me then. You know, what do you mean? You're just going to let me go?
When in reality, he was so courageous and so secure internally that he didn't have to fight. And he could say, I want you to be happy. If it's not with me, go find your happiness. And the cowardly approach or the insecure based approach is just dig in and fight and jealousy and control and power over and yeah.
But so like getting used to that though, because it's that generational, that learned behavior of they really love you if they're controlling. They don't let you go out. They don't even want you talking to another male. You know, they're going to stand there and fight it out with you, because it was more like they're fighting for you, not fighting with you.
You had to that. Yeah.
Yeah, but breaking all of that and him going, what, you want to be right? Here, you're right. Like, I'm not going to argue with you. And it drove me nuts. And now, you know, we're 17 years together. And like, we might bicker. I'm like, whatever, you're being an asshole. Like, but that's the extent of it. I don't even argue anymore with him. Or anybody really. Like, cause it wasn't just him. I'd go to school. I'd argue with my daughter's teachers. I would argue with the principals. Like, you know, it was just a behavior that I don't know, I became very attached to and took a lot of therapy and a lot of work to break free from it, where I'm like, that is a lot of energy to argue with you. I either know I'm right or I know I'm wrong. And if I am right, I'm not going to convince you that I'm right. You have your belief and your thoughts on it. And you could just go sit in stupid land and I'm going to go, you know, but
Oh, that's awesome.
So even just that, like that learned behavior, there's still some I can't break. It drives me nuts. Drives me nuts.
We're working.
But my mother was a clean freak, like OCD clean freak. But she was a drug addict, so she would do uppers. And I'd wake up, it'd be 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and she's like scrubbing the ceilings. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, it's dirty. It's dirty. And you could literally eat off of her kitchen floor at any given time. That's just how she was. And I am like that. Like, I remember in the beginning, Jesse was like, you're like a drug addict. Clean. Like, are you on drugs? And I'm like, it's such a learned behavior that I'm literally imitating her on drugs. Like, I just aggressively clean. Like, if I have anxiety, I clean. If I'm like stressed, I clean. And it's like my rage cleaning. And it's just such a learned behavior. So it's even if like the trauma wasn't directed at you or the abuse wasn't directed at you, just those very minute learned behaviors. There was a study like, and it's complete opposite spectrum, but there was a lady who she always cut her turkey or she always like cockspatched her turkey and put it in the oven. And her daughter asked her, why do you do that? She said, I don't know. That's what my mother always did. And so they went to like that Thanksgiving and that mother always, so they asked her, well, why do you do that? She said, well, I don't know. It's how my mother always did it. And so like the third generation back, they were like, why do you do that to the turkey? And she goes, because my oven was too small. Wow. But it was like, she did it but it continued on through the generations. They didn't know why they did it. They just knew that's how it was done. And so they continue that.
Yeah.
And it's like, so even
it's just like a overarching deal. If it doesn't serve you, if it's not adding peace and happiness and contentment and feeling a sense of settled in your life, it's an issue and pay attention to it. Ask, get curious, ask the questions, investigate yourself, ask yourself, why am I doing this? You'll learn so much. Does it serve you? Does it not serve you? Is it causing an issue in your life? Fix it. Pay attention.
So do you and Jim fight at all? Like, not fight, but do you guys argue at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you do it on purpose sometimes just so you're like, we're healthy? We're having these little...
No. kind of like not drinking for a month just to make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
Right? Just to make sure that you're healthy. No.
So how, I know that we're extending time a little bit here, but what did you take away from the way that you were raised to how you, not to talk directly, but like how you brought that into your parenting?
Communication is key. Talk about the hard things, ask the questions, but listen. Listening is, you'll get way more out of a conversation when you're a listener instead of talking. I don't know if you've done this, but like with my kids, I'll catch myself. I'll jump in like, well, I know what it's like to be in 7th grade. I know what it's like to be a senior in high school. It's probably da 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 da. And then I just stop and if they're still around, if they haven't totally ended the conversation, they come back around and they explain where they're coming from. And I'm like, I had no idea. I didn't even think about it from that perspective. So yeah, I think that's such in an honest communication, open, try to be non-judgmental. You don't always know just because you're a parent, just because you were a kid. So, and same in my relationship. We have a rule. If something's still bothering us for over 24 hours, you got to bring it up. And, maybe in that 24 hours, it kind of goes away, or you work it out in your head, or, you read your sheet behind you, what's the facts based type thing. But if it's still on my mind, I got to bring it up.
Yeah, with ours, so I always tell them, well, when I ask them, it's part of that listening, like, do you want me to give my opinion? Do you need me to help you fix it? Or do you just want me to listen? So they pick which one of those. And it can vary. They could be like, well, listen, and if you think you could help fix it, then...
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But, so That, and then more with my daughter, my son, not yet. But with her, I would always tell her, like, do you need me to put my friend hat on? Or like, because I believe we should always be parents first. We have plenty of time when you're an adult to be friends. But I also know that if I want them to have truthful information or, the facts, I have to leave that open for them to come to me and ask me. Otherwise, they're going to go to their friend who doesn't know. So I tell my dog, if you need me to put my friend hat on and just shut up and you just vent and swear and say and do whatever you need to do, then just let me know and we'll put that on, and you kind of have free range to say and do, and you're not going to be in trouble, and it won't get brought up again outside of that time. And so that seems to work as far as communicating with them.
I love that. Set the expectation. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's because everybody, we all as parents were like, God, our kids, they could be shitheads, or, they could be however at home. And I think it was my personal therapist at the time. She said, I was like, everybody says how great my kids are. They're so great. They're this, they're that. I said, and then they come home, they're shitheads. And, she said, well, because Desiree, they're human. They're not perfect. She said, so they're perfect. They're doing all the right things in the world that you teach them to do, but you're their safe place. They have to let that down at some point and just be who they are. And they're going to be bitchy, and they're going to have, outbursts, and they're going to complain. But the fact that they can do all of that means that you're creating a safe enough environment for them to do that.
Yep.
So that's what, whenever I hear like other moms or even new moms, they're like, oh, everybody says, I'm like, as long as they're good and doing what they're supposed to be doing out in the world, you're doing fantastic.
Yeah. And that's the childhood that they're growing up in, to feel safe at home and to express what they're expressing within bounds and within safety and within, but yeah, I think that it's, you're doing it right, and you broke that cycle from how you grew up. Well, good. I hope this is, helpful. I hope that our listeners are getting something out of this, and there's probably a like or subscribe button. And if you've ever got questions or comments, or you want to chime in, or
if you want to be a guest, we'll have the form to be linked below. If you have trauma or anything that you want to discuss, we are more than happy to have you on as a guest as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unguarded Minds. Here we are.
Till next time.
All right. See you later. Bye.